I wish I were capable enough to express the sentiment that Randy just echoed in our midst here with this song, but I'm not. Some of you know, maybe all of you, that Janet and I went on a trip to Branson, Missouri, and we went primarily because the Veterans with Purple Heart were all invited from across this country to attend an engagement that they had planned for them. There's about 300 veterans there, and of that 300, there were 2 World War II veterans there. We don't have any World War II veterans here today, do we? And as far as I know, we have 2 Korean veterans, myself and Richard over here. Anybody else? Well, there were 2 World War II veterans there out of 300. There were 4 Korean veterans there. Now, I'm saying that to say this. You have to be 89 or in your 90s to have been a World War II veteran. And you had to be in your 80s to be a Korean veteran. Well, what does that say to me? That says to me that we're all dying off. And if you think that you're not a part of that, then just wait. Our turn will come. And we someday will all pass away and leave all of this to someone else. When I thought about saying a few words this morning, I went back and did a little work in my history and realized that 13 men came up with a document called the Constitution of the United States. Now, I don't know how, knowing men as I do and people as I do today, I don't know how in the world those 13 people ever got together in mind and spirit and came up with that document. They began the session with a period of prayer and offered up what they believed was God's way for America to survive in the world today. Now, friends, they had no idea what kind of a world this would be today. Believe me, they didn't. 25 years ago, most of us didn't know what the world was going to be today, right? But we know that tremendous changes are taking place in the world today. Changes that affect us in one way or another, and that we have to take into consideration when we think about America, where it's been, where it is, and where it's going to go in the world today. I hope that you're aware of the fact that America is only 240 years old. Let that sink in for a minute. 1776 till today. 240 years old. All the rest of the world that I know about began 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 million years ago. You understand what I'm saying? This country has made tremendous strides, all because that people in America had initiative. They weren't satisfied to accept things as they were. They believed things could be better. You got me? And it all came from the fact that we are a country of immigrants. How many of you had forefathers or parents who were immigrants? Let's see your hands. See? Well, my forefathers came over here as Hessian soldiers during the Revolutionary War, originally fought for the British, but somehow got mixed up and turned to the United States. And after the war was over, they said, we're not going home, we're going to stay in America. America is where we belong. We're going to stay. Now they came from Germany, from Europe, from the Rhine Valley, the industrial place in Germany. And all of our forefathers came from those two brothers. We live in a world where men and women have never been satisfied with the way things were, and they said, we can do it better and differently. And so they set out to do it. They started a great push westward through the states and on to the West Coast, not knowing what would befall them on the way, death and destruction. But onward they went, believing in what God had called them to do, to build a nation where men and women were free. You got that? Where men and women were free. Now you listen to this. I'm going to share with you here. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, men and women means both genders, and that they are endowed by their Creator with a capital C. You got that? They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Now, if that isn't what everybody has been doing in this country, then I don't know what's been going on. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. Accordingly, all experience have shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and upsurns pursuing invariable the same objects invented and designed to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and upsurns, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world, and then they list all the abuses that England had imposed upon this great nation, upon the colonies. Now, I'm not going to go on with that, but I would invite your attention to it. You can find it on the internet. Pull it up and take the opportunity to read it, to look at it for what it is, and to know that God has given us the inalienable rights of freedom. Now, I can't tell you this morning how important the freedom that we all have is. We live in a world where men and women, because of one reason or another, have found it within their powers to go to war, to destroy other people. I'm happy that when our president went to Japan, he didn't apologize for Hiroshima or Nagasaki. When they estimated the casualties that it would take to conquer Japan, they estimated that 100,000 people in Japan would be destroyed, but we would lose from 500,000 to 600,000 men to conquer Japan. Now, I say to you, we didn't start that war. We've never started any war that I know of. Didn't start that war, but it was the Japanese that bombed Pearl Harbor December the 7th. So we know the tyranny that was involved in that situation. And we weren't the first to be a part of the advancement of the Japanese army, because China and Korea was all suffering because of their invasion into their countries. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were being killed left and right. And so we lived in a world in 240 years where we were involved in 17 different engagements. Could you tell me what they were? The American Revolution, the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the American Civil War, the Great Sioux War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Persian Gulf War, the war in Afghanistan, the Iraqi War, and the war on Israel today. I only share those with you to say that the reason we're sitting here this morning is because men and women, when they heard the call to come to aid their nation, America, they stepped forward, put on a uniform, and went to battle. I remember very succinctly in our home when 6 of my brothers left home. 4 of them volunteered, 2 of them were drafted, but they all went willingly because they felt like they were doing a good thing. I was telling Janet, we were talking about this today, and I said to Janet, I said, you probably don't remember anything about this, you weren't living then, but we used to collect stamps, war stamps, for 10 cents a week in the school where I went to, in grade school. Every week, each one of us would buy a stamp for 10 cents. And then at the end of the year, the school turned those in, turned them all in. And it's amazing how this country rallied, not just with the soldiers, but with the men and women and young people who had the heart and the mind and the will to do whatever we needed to do in order to support those out there. I know that when I was in Korea, we were told that it took 11 men in the rear, 11 people in the rear to support one person on the line. Now that meant men and women, working in factories and other places in order to support, to build, to make the material that was needed in order to engage the enemy. So we live in a great country. Please don't forget that. I hope every one of you will make sure that you go and vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I wouldn't. But I'm telling you, to be a part of a nation that's free, imposed upon us the right to vote. We need to vote. You go vote. And if you don't vote, shame on you. You don't deserve this country. We live in a country that, thank God, is free. And it's going to depend upon you and me to see that it continues to be free for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, our neighbors and our friends, so that they all can have a part of what we have enjoyed in life. Amen? Amen. All right. What are we singing here for a closing hymn, Janet? Shalom to you, hymns of blessing. It'll be on the board here, I think. Shall we stand while